immediately when we have them at this particular point, we notify the investigator for the county attorney's office, and that investigator then begins to take over that case. But most of that testimony would hinge on the forensic interviewers and the forensic examiners that would actually be performing the examinations and interviews regarding those particular victims. For the most part, the deputies and myself of the sheriff's office don't do those interviews. And so the crux of those cases hinges on those specialists. There was also a statement by Commissioner Zalawi stated in the Missoulian about receiving a sixth deputy, which in essence would seem to be that there would be 8 members of our agency. That sixth deputy is not a full deputy. It's not a position that I asked for. It was a position that was discussed in commissioner meetings in regards to the misdemeanor probation officer position. The grant money that was funding the misdemeanor probation officer position was running out. An approach was going to be made by the Justice Court to ask for continued funding. I was approached as to whether my office would be willing to accept that misdemeanor probation position, and I agreed, but at the time I'd expressed to the commissioners that it was their decision because moving that position to a deputy position would include a higher pay. I would be willing to accept the other responsibilities, but it was strictly in the county commissioners' hands as to whether they want to move that. But that position was discussed to be a trial for 1 year. It was not a guaranteed position. And the other aspect to that is not a regular position that I'm going to be able to assign a deputy to work shifts. The misdemeanor probation officer has to supervise his probationers, and from the district court, pretrial supervision. There wouldn't be enough work for full time for that misdemeanor probation officer, and during that discussion with the commissioners, we discussed the possibility of assigning some school resource officer position and duties to that officer. And that perhaps in addressing that with the school, if they felt that it was a benefit, then we might be able to look at trying to fund that position with grants. But even with using that position, if it became permanent, as a school resource officer and as a misdemeanor probation officer, it would not be a position that I'd be able to use as a full-time deputy. So that really, in essence, just leaves 7 in the department, 5 deputies, myself, and the undersheriff. One of those deputies is currently in the academy. My undersheriff was injured at the end of July and is not expected to be back to full duty at the earliest, probably till the end of December, if we're fortunate. That puts us down to 5. If I were to remove Deputy Balenger, that would allow 4 officers, myself and 3 deputies, to cover this county 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is not sufficient. There was one other comment that was in there about issues that had not been addressed that were from a long time ago. As far as I'm concerned, they're not stipulated, they're not delineated. And so that comment, from my viewpoint, is meaningless. I believe that we have trustworthy and competent deputies to perform their job. Since the time that I took office, we have consistently been short. And with the circumstances that we've had, I believe the deputies have performed greatly. There's one other issue that I want to address at this time, and I'm going to allow either Deputy Balenger to address it or his attorney, Mr. Bewley, because it was also in the Missoulian. And this has been brought up several times, and I think it needs to be put to rest and let the whole story come out. Deputy Balenger has been accused of poaching, and I've heard stories that range from one end of the spectrum to the other. Poaching was never an issue. This was something that occurred before he ever worked for the sheriff's office. And I believe that it would be best if he were to explain it to you, and you can hear it from his own mouth, and we could finally put that to bed.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. By way of introduction, my name is Richard Bewley. I am Jim Balenger's personal attorney. I've been his personal attorney since the time these allegations first came to light. By way of history, I've been an attorney in Missoula for 32 years. I've represented peace officers, I've sued peace officers, and I've done quite a bit of criminal defense work in my time, and so I'm pretty darn familiar with what goes on in jails, what goes on in sheriff's departments, and what goes on in criminal prosecutions. And in my 32 years as a practicing attorney in this field, I have never seen anything like this. What has happened in this case with Jim Balenger is truly unique. As the sheriff told you, this all began back in September. Jim cooperated with the investigation fully. He met with the investigator and gave a statement in December. From December on, Jim, through my office, attempted to find out what was going on with the investigation. He didn't feel right taking money, leave with pay, while this investigation was going on, and we couldn't imagine why it was taking so long. A report from Brant Light from the Montana Attorney General's office was finally issued on May 30th of this year. And in that report, it says something very important, and that is that after the total investigation, that the Attorney General's office could find not enough evidence to prosecute Jim for assault or any other crime. And what that means, and what Marcia Boris, the county attorney, knows it means, is one word: innocence. A person is innocent until proven guilty, and that's what Jim Balenger is. And this character assassination, this smear campaign by the county attorney, makes absolutely no sense because Jim Balenger is innocent. There was no evidence with which to prosecute Jim Balenger. He accepted this 5-day suspension to move the matter along because he just wanted to go back to work protecting the citizens of Mineral County. And that's what he's been doing. However, Marcia Boris has said and has done an action saying that she will not prosecute any case in which Jim Balenger is involved. Now, of course, the sheriff can't force the county attorney to prosecute cases. That is solely in her discretion. However, I think it's important for you as citizens of Mineral County, for your safety, for your well-being, to understand what is going on here. Marcia Boris has said that she ethically cannot present Jim Balenger as a witness because of Brady versus Maryland. As the sheriff said, that is a case in which the United States Supreme Court has held that a prosecutor, if the prosecutor knows of exculpatory evidence, it must be disclosed to the defense. Exculpatory evidence is, for example, DNA, showing that the guy didn't do it. Anything which would tend to show that the defendant is not guilty. The other category is information which may affect the credibility of one of the state's witnesses. It doesn't have to be a police officer, it can be any witness. And where that most often arises is in cases in which there is an informant or a co-defendant who makes a deal to testify against another co-defendant. In other words, what was this guy promised for his testimony? Now, in the credibility issue, although Marcia Boris has said that she's not going to prosecute any case in which Jim Balenger is involved because of lack of credibility, it is important to note one thing. There has never, ever been any specific allegation of untruthfulness on the part of Jim Balenger. Marcia Boris has never, ever, to the sheriff, to Jim, or myself, said told us what it is that Jim has ever been untruthful about. We have no idea. In all of the documents which Ms. Boris gave to the press, there is not one single allegation of untruthfulness on the part of Jim Balenger. So the question you have to ask yourself is, why is the county attorney doing this? Why is the county attorney letting drunk drivers go? Why is the county attorney allowing people who elude police to go? We don't know. We have no idea. But we do know that at least one DUI in which Jim Balenger was not even the arresting officer, but rather he was simply the guy who did the testing on the Intoxilizer 8000, she dismissed it. You got drunk drivers driving around, and Marcia Boris is letting them go.
Why don't you wait till she's here to
Well, now, hey, assault, man.
just like no.
Well, I'm telling you the truth. You can hear it or not. It doesn't matter to me.
Handcuff somebody else and hit him, and it's okay, but somebody else has got him in a hold.
I'll show it to you.
Come on, come on.
After we're done, I will show you the email where she did it, sir. Now,
If I assault an officer, I go to jail. I'm handcuffed, and another one has me in a headlock, and he gets tased and punched in the stomach. That is an assault. I don't care what the evidence.
now, moving on to the issue of the rumor of Jim Balenger supposedly poaching something. That's simply not true. There is a charge. Jim moved to Montana in 2002. He bought a house, bought some property, went to build a house back in September of 2002. At the time, he was living in California and came back and forth between Montana and California over the next couple of years. During that time, he actually registered to vote in Montana, registered vehicles in Montana, and paid property taxes in Montana. Unfortunately, in 2004, the building burned, and he started doing it again. In 2005, he moved to Montana full-time. In July of 2005, in October of 2005, he purchased a resident hunting license and shot an elk. Since he owned property in Montana since 2002, had registered his vehicles in Montana since 2002, and registered to vote in Montana since 2002, he believed that he was a resident. And he paid taxes, property taxes, just like all the rest of you. Eventually, there was some sort of investigation. He was interviewed by game wardens and asked if he had any antlers related to October of 2005, excuse me. He said that he did. He was finally cited for, and we have the ticket here, for having a resident license rather than a non-resident license. He was finally charged with that in 2009. At the time, his attorney and he worked out a plea agreement with the county attorney's office in which if he paid a fine on this of $500 and didn't get in trouble for 1 year, he would have a deferred imposition of sentence, which means at the end of the 1 year, his plea would be entered as not guilty and he would be found not guilty. That's what Montana statute provides. He successfully completed the conditions, so therefore, in 2010, he was found not guilty. He was not hired in the sheriff's office until many years after this all occurred. He is not part of any sort of poaching ring or anything whatsoever. But what this comes down to is Jim Balenger has done nothing wrong.
Sorry.
There you go.
Want to allow the press, if they had some questions then at this time.
I'm wondering why.
Oh, do we have the microphone? You can take it. It's got it.
I was just curious why we are having this public meeting tonight when the county attorney is out of town on vacation. That's my only question.
The question was asked why I'm having this meeting when the county attorney is out of town. I had this press brief to address the issues that were in the media, and at the time, I didn't know that the county attorney was going to be out of town. The point was not to get into a big shooting match with anyone. I wanted to address the issues that I felt that were not consistent, that were incorrect in the media. And the problem is that the rumors that were going around town needed to be quashed. Unfortunately, what had happened is that for the Mineral Independent, I received a call out on patrol because I'd been short. My undersheriff had been out since the end of July, injured chasing a burglar. And unfortunately, there are several days in which I am the only officer during the day, and I need to be out. I need to be patrolling. I need to answer calls. I need to write reports. And so at the time that I received that call, I did not have the opportunity to respond, and they had a deadline. The same thing happened, or similarly, with the Missoulian at that time. I was gone on that particular Friday. I had personal business that I needed to address, which I've not had the opportunity to be able to do, to take the time. And so that call came in on that Friday, and I received a phone call from my dispatch office stating that the Missoulian had a deadline for Sunday and they needed something from me right away. Well, I'm sorry, I already had personal business that I needed to attend to and was not going to be able to address their particular issues or questions at that time or provide a statement. And that hasn't been that long ago. And so I took the time now then to